When you're working with RSpec expectations, when mocking and stubbing, there's a useful feature called argument matching that lets you say expect something to receive a method call with certain arguments, and then those arguments can be a variety of values. You can see on this table on the RSpec docs website all the different ones that are available. You can say with a Boolean but not specify the value. You can say with no args. You can say with any args. And as you get more and more into using RSpec and testing your code, these argument matchers become really useful and valuable. Let's look at the RSpec code that they give as an example, and then we'll get into writing some of our own code, picking up where the RSpec mocking screencast left off. So you can see here they've got a test double, and they're saying expect the double to receive the method foo with the number 1, anything, and then a regex matching the string r bar. So it passes when the args match, and then it fails when they don't match. And this example is basic because it's actually calling the double, but it shows the feature, and that's useful. But this table is particularly useful where it shows you the args. But let's dig into an example of where we'd use it. So like I said, this code picks up where the RSpec mocking episode left off. So if I run RSpec, BE is just short for bundle exec. It's an alias in my config. It runs all the tests. They're all passing, so that's good. Let me give you the lay of the land, because that will be helpful. Right now, we have an order class that has a bunch of attributes relating to the order details, and we've got checkout. Now, checkout does a variety of things. It calculates the tax, it processes the payment with a payment gateway, and then based on the result of the processing, it sets a state and sends an email. And tax calculator and payment gateway don't do anything, right? If I go to they're just empty. If I go to the code there, they're just empty. And that episode we drove out the checkout method with mocking, where we're taking payment gateway and saying it receives certain values. Now, for argument matchers, what we want to focus on here is so we have this test, right? There are all these specs for the order checkout method, which that's like a really important method. If you had an application that's processing payments, you want to really make sure this is well tested. So what we're going to focus on is payment gateway and what payment gateway receives. So it calls out to the payment gateway with the items, totals, and tax, which is $30. And then we're saying payment method. Well, payment method in this case is a credit card. And it's just a double. But I don't really think that that's quite realistic, right? Like, what a lot of payment gateways have you do is send over an entire hash of parameters that meet their API's specifications. And that means that we need to test it and test it well, rather than just using this quick double that we introduced to, for the focus of a different lesson. So instead here of payment method, we're gonna keep payment method, but we're gonna send additional details to the payment gateway. I think that's a better way to illustrate this. So we're gonna say context when the payment method is a credit card. And this is slightly contrived, but I think it'll show the example. It'll work for our purposes. So when the payment gateway is a credit card, and we'll just take this down here, we'll say it calls out to the payment gateway with the items, totals, and tax, and the properly... Well, here's what I would actually say is, we'll say it calls out to the payment gateway with the items, totals, and tax. And we'll use our first argument matcher. So we'll say payment gateway to receive process payment with 30, because that's what we're testing, the amount. And here, instead of payment method, we'll say anything. Now what that does is it says any argument can be passed in here. This test doesn't care, right? This expectation is only concerned with the 30, which comes from the math of having a $15 item, a $5 item, $20, and then a $10 item. There's where we get the $30, right? So this is testing that the math is correct. And that's important. And this test isn't concerned with what gets sent for the payment method. Now, let's say when the payment method is a credit card, we'll say double credit card, and we'll say something like kind, credit. And we have to define these attributes because we're just making this up as we go. But, there'd probably be an API you'd integrate with. And then we'll have number. And let's do Stripe's fake credit card number, which is 4242 4242 4242. There might be another set of digits there. I can't remember. And what else is there? There's CVV, or is it CCV? Credit card verification. I think it's CCV. And we'll say it's 123, and then we'll have an expiry, and we'll say it's 12/24, right? And that's saying, we're like fleshing out what this payment method looks like. So here we'll say it calls out to the payment gateway with the items total and tax. We're going to change that because this is a new test. We're going to say it calls out to the payment gateway with the properly formatted payment method. So we'll say expect payment method to receive process payment. I'm going to move this into a separate line so that it's easier to read with the big text. So with 30, here we can just say kind of integer, because we don't really care what that is in this case, right? We're just testing the payment method, not the total. You could keep it 32. That's really up to you and your, what you prefer. But for this, let's focus particularly on the payment method. So we'll say it has a hash, and we'll say it has type. We'll say something like buyer email. I had an email up there, buyer@example.com, because maybe they want that email, right? The payment gateway for their purposes. And then we'll have something like payment method is, we'll say kind, kind, credit, number, 424242, and then we'll say CCV, we'll just duplicate all this. So now we're saying instead of it receiving the double, it's supposed to receive the hash. So let's get this passing. It's failing. It's saying it got the double credit card, not the hash. So we'll open the code for order. I feel like the text is a little bit big, but if it's too big, it's making it tough to navigate, but maybe it's good for the screencast. Sorry. Okay, back to it. So here, where we're saying payment gateway process payment, tax plus items total payment method, we're going to instead make this a hash from the payment method. So that hash we want to mirror. We'll say, what did I call the parameter here? Buyer email? Let's actually just change that to email, because maybe the payment gateway doesn't care, right? We'll make an email, we'll set it to buyer email, and then we'll have what we called payment method. So let's actually break this into a different line so we can see it. We'll have email, and then we'll have payment method. And I'm going to copy and paste some of this because that is easier. Right? We'd say payment method dot kind, payment method dot number payment method dot CCV, and then we'll have payment method dot expiry. Now if we run this, we'd hope it passes, but it doesn't. We can see up here we've got a sense of what's going on here. So there might be a typo, there might be something else wrong. But let's see what happened. Kind of integer. Oh, it's because 30.0 is a float. So that's the problem. We'll fix that. Now it passes. And, you know, that's, if we were running tests first, that would be nice to know, like, oh yeah, it receives a float. Here we're saying we care about the 30. We're testing that. Here we're saying we care about the params. Now because this is a slightly contrived example, you might be saying, well, why don't we just keep this 30? And you could, but if you're working with mocking code that has really complex args, like this hash is getting pretty complex, it can be nice, you can have more focused tests that better reveal the intent of what's under test, and I think that is really valuable. So here we're saying it calls out to the payment gateway with that hash. Let's run all the tests and see what happens. It's saying it's having a problem with our payment method double. So let's fix our like global payment method double so that it works, and we'll just use that one up there. And let's delete this and say C payment method above for this double, for the double under test. So we run all that, it passes. Something that we can then now do is, let's say that there's a payment method of bank transfer, electronic bank transfer. So we'll say is EBT. And let's say what we're going to do. We're going to say it calls out to the payment gateway with the properly formatted payment method. So that's duplicated, but it's still true, right? It's that we're within a different context now. So we'll copy and paste this, bring it over, and we'll say expect it to receive payment with kind of float. That stays the same, but we want a different test double. And I promise this will loop back around to the argument matchers. So let's set up the double under tests for this context, and we'll, instead of credit card, we'll call it EBT. For kind, we'll call it EBT. And then I don't know exactly what it would be looking for here, but it would probably be account number 12345, and then routing number. We'll call it 98765. Obviously, there's some security implications of just passing those around in your code, but this is just an example. So, you know, be sensitive of passing that kind of data around. But now let's go in here. Let's run this. We'll just see what happens. And we see it fails, right? Saying received unexpected number with no args, payment method, because this new kind of payment method doesn't include a number. It includes an account number and a routing number. So now we're going to get into our changing our expectation. We're going to say instead of kind, we're going to say EBT, and we're going to say, we'll just match our numbers here. We'll just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we'll do the opposite there, 98765. Delete that, run it again. Still fails because of the same error, but our test is now more accurate than you know, what we had before, right? Which is good. So like this test mirrors what we want it to mirror, but our code isn't passing yet. So let's make that pass. And what I'm gonna do is, instead of this existing and making this code more complex, we're gonna make a gateway args, or let's call it gateway hash, and we'll make a private method out of that. So we'll say private method gateway hash. Let's run it again. All of our tests pass except for that new one. And then now we'll say, we're going to write some bad code, and then we'll make it better, right, with red, green, refactor. We'll say if payment method type, well, it's dot type, or no, it's kind, equals equals credit, return this. Else, we'll return a different hash because the needs are different. So instead of this, we'll say, maybe we say else if, just to be really explicit, equals EBT. And maybe these would be constants. You know, we can refactor this and make it better. We'll say account number, say payment method, account no, whoops. And then we'll say routing number. Let's go back, run our tests. It fails because it's missing end on line 50. So what happened here? If forget what else if. I think else if is different in Ruby. It is. Okay. So now we can, I'm going to zoom into this pane so we can see our error. We see it got email, and we're missing our kind. So here we want to say kind, payment method, dot kind. Run that again. Oops, payment is actually not what it's called. Okay, fix that, run it. Okay, it passes. Now let's refactor some code and make it a bit better. And then we can refactor our tests and make those a bit better. So this gateway hash is can be improved, right? We can do something like hash equals the things that are the same. And then we can say hash is equal to hash. Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Hash, payment method is equal to hash, payment method, dot merge, our new hash. So the things that we don't have in common, which are these. Delete that. That gets a bit better. Bring this down here and bring account and routing and that up there. Format that. Delete that. So that code's a bit better. Run our tests again. It's failing. Why? We're losing some of our args with some of that code. So let's see what happened there. Oh, it's returning this, but we here want to return our hash. So now it passes, right? It was returning the last statement, which was this assigning of payment method. So it was returning our new payment method key instead of the whole hash. So that's better. We might even be able to do this. Merge bang, that says modify the hash in place instead of running, instead of having it be on both sides and then updating it and reassigning it. So that's kind of nice. So yeah, that's all getting a bit better. Let's, something we could do here is we could do case, payment, kind, make it a switch statement, which would, when credit, when PPT, because you could imagine other payment methods being added in the future. I think generally switch statements are preferred for this kind of changing values based on a certain attribute of an element. So yeah, that's feeling better. Now let's make our tests a bit better. So there's a bit of duplication that isn't ideal, and we'll start with an arg matcher. That was a lot of setup to get to arg matchers. More arg matchers. We're using some, right, with anything, but let's do another one, and we'll say it calls out to the payment gateway. We'll say it includes the buyer's email in the payment gateway in the params. And now what we'll say, okay, we finally made it to what we want. We'll say hash including email buyer@example.com. And that will let us say we don't care about the other arguments in the method call. We just care specifically that buyer email gets sent, and that's what's important. I've got some kind of missing brackets going on. Kind of float. Let me pull this up to one line. Don't know why that's, oh, I see what's missing. Looking in the wrong place. So if we pull this here, pull that there, run that again, it passes. Run all the tests, they all pass. And this is like, you know, again, this is a little bit contrived because it's not a huge hash and there aren't a ton of arguments or whatever, but this is really helpful because instead of having one test that covers this huge hash that gets passed through, we can say, you know, no matter what, the buyer email gets sent. We're pleased with that. Now down here, we get rid of that and we say hash including this, which says, let me get rid of that bracket. Pull up hash including, I'm missing something, subject checkout. I am missing another paren. Some of this gets goofy with the parens and stuff, but so, right, we don't care, we're not testing the amount. We don't care about the buyer email. What we care is that there's a hash that includes payment method. And then we'll do the same down here. Hash including, get rid of email because we want to just focus in, zoom in on that, add our extra paren, run the tests, they all pass. That's arg matchers in RSpec. I hope that was helpful. Gives you a taste of what you can and can't do. To go back here, just now that we've gone through that slight journey, is that you can see hash excluding. That could be really nice, right? Maybe if there's an object with a certain value, you want to then say this is excluded from the hash that's sent. So hash excluded is really useful. Array including is nice for different params. Having attributes, super nice. And then, you know, things like instance of, kind of very useful. Any args and using regex to match things, all really I found useful when using RSpec. Something that I'm not going to cover in this episode, but we'll cover in a future episode, is custom argument matchers. And those are really great when you're interacting, like you're testing code that you're not mocking and stubbing fully, so you don't have like full control over the object, but you know it will have certain attributes. And there's some cool things you can do, like defining your own custom arg matchers. But this is the basics of arg matchers explained. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.